Hey guys, it's Derp again. It's time for the build that I am probably going to transition to when I am shot calling and when I am leading a war roster. Um, my build right now when I'm doing shot calling and I can't really focus on micro calls is the Blunderbuss Ice Gauntlet in Heavy. That's what I shot call from. That's what I play a lot of in wars. It's basically my main other than Bruiser or Group Healer. Um, and this is a build that I think is going to kind of take that place. And I'm going to go over some things and reasoning why I decided to take some of this stuff. And this build I have tested extensively in the PTR. I wasn't recording when I was doing OPRs and 3v3s and dueling and stuff, but the OPR is kind of actually, or the PTR is kind of dying right now. There's not a lot of people on later at night when I'm on, and there's just not a lot of time to go test these builds out in OPR anymore and get more footage. So I'm just going to kind of go over it in the New World Skill Builder on New World Database. So what I run in this is pretty much exactly the same thing as I ran in my heavy bruiser build for Point Tank. I do run Calamity Counter. I'm going to go all the way down with the Calamity Counter, and then I'm going to go all the way over here on Roaring Rupture. Now, Calamity Counter is kind of a controversial pick for any Great Sword build that's going to be in war. And the main reason why is because if you block 3 attacks with it, it does a knockback. The knockback is about a meter. And it strikes everybody in a 360-degree angle within 4 meters. So if they're at the edge of that and you knock them back an extra meter, you're knocking them back a total of 5 meters, right? Or you're keeping them 5 meters away from you. That's a big knockback. So, and knockbacks don't really have any place in war, especially non-directional knockbacks like Blast Shot. Blast Shot has a place in war, but it's only for the people who are good with it. You want to prevent this from basically ever happening. Now, when you go into Calamity Counter, you don't want to use it the whole way through. You're using this basically as an iframe and to get back into Defiant stance. So if you could time it properly to get the 1 or 2 blocks off, that's great. But you're using it for the grit to block the attacks, like a few quick attacks, to get stacks of bleed, and to get a small heal off on yourself or increase the crit chance. Now, if you're not really good with iframing and quick timing abilities like this, don't take it. Take Hook or Relentless Rush. Don't take that ability. If you're not good with the quick counter, and what I mean by this is like basically you press it, you block that first 1 or 2 attacks, and then you press it again so you don't get the knockback off, it's going to be good. And the reason why is because you could block arrows, fireballs, all kinds of stuff with that. So it also can give you a huge boost of stamina regen if you have the perk. So if you have a 3 perk piece with like Shirking Fortification, Resilient, and Energizing Counter, you're going to get a lot of stamina back really quickly by using this. It's very good for stamina mitigation or stamina management. So I'm going to take it because I've tested it and I'm very, very good. I've been hit by multiple people and been able to get it off and use it like an iframe to protect myself. So I trained with it. Otherwise, you take the Steadfast Strikes. I'm taking this. I'm going to go all the way down Roaring Rupture. You take this. I'm going to take Perfect Vigilance because it gives you the 20% Fortify. Now, you don't want to take Guard Shift because you're not really going to be blocking unless you're heavy attacking in this, and you don't want to keep yourself in Defiant stance by having that block up. So I'm going to take Arrow Deflection and then Undying Defiance for the extra heal from attacking, and attacking for within 3 seconds of blocking heals for 15% of the damage dealt instead. So if you attack directly after a block, which you are going to be blocking. So whenever you transition from Defiant stance into Onslaught stance, you're going to have your block up. So you're going to be getting 15% of that health back. It's 15% leeching on every heavy attack, as long as you're going from Defiant stance into Onslaught stance. So since I'm taking Calamity Counter and these, I'm going to be able to toggle between the two very quickly. Now for Onslaught stance, I'm shooting for Skyward Slash. So I'm going to take Heavy Blade, because I want the 15% armor penetration on heavies. I'm going to take the Keen Posture, because after gaining Onslaught stance, your next attack is within 5 seconds has 100% crit. And then I'm going straight down this. From there, Step and Strike is pretty much a mandatory. After dodging, gain a 10% in power for the next 3 hits within 10 seconds. It also, attack empowered by this effect, restore 10 stamina on hit. That's huge. And then from there, you're going to want Aggressive Shift, because it allows you to go into Onslaught stance by using a heavy. So when you're doing damage, if you're trying to burst people down, heavy attacks and Skyward Slash are what you're going to use. And Skyward Slash is a must-have in basically all War Great Sword builds, because it does 80% weapon damage on the first hit, applies 2 stacks of Rend minimum, each stack being 5% for 10 seconds. If you're in Onslaught stance when you start the attack, it applies 3. So that's a 15% Rend for 10 seconds. That's actually pretty freaking good. Skyward Slash deals 140% weapon damage if you activate the skill again. So if you do Skyward Slash, it launches you upward. When you click at the top, click again at the top to do a light attack, it slams it back down, dealing an additional hit for 140%. So that's a total of 220 if you hit with both. And then you want Sickening Slash, because the first attack applies disease, which reduces healing by 20% for 10 seconds. So it's a long disease. And it also turns the follow-up strike into a 3-meter AoE. So what I end up taking is Crush the Weak after that, and I don't think I have any more. Yeah, so the last one I have is Crush the Weak, because critical hit chance increased by 10% when attacking foes with an active debuff. That's always. So this is my Greatsword build. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to pair this with the Blunderbuss. My main is Ice Gauntlet Blunderbuss, so I'm going to pair this with the Blunderbuss because it pairs very well. When I talk about weapons, it's usually a primary weapon and a secondary weapon. So what I mean by this is, if you're doing Ice Gauntlet and Blunderbuss, the Ice Gauntlet is your secondary weapon, because you're not going to be sitting there blasting fools with the Ice Gauntlet when you have something better on your main bar, right? Or on your bar. So you have a Blunderbuss, you're going to be sitting there blasting fools mostly with your Blunderbuss. When you have a Great Axe and a Warhammer build, like a normal Bruiser, the Great Sword is what you're traditionally sitting there and smashing people with light attacks and heavy attacks, and it's the main source of your damage. Very rarely will you be sitting there and heavy attacking with your Warhammer. So the Great Sword Blunderbuss is kind of tricky, because which one do you, in my opinion, they're both primary weapons. So that's why I also don't recommend pairing the Great Sword and Great Axe, because they're both huge damage dealing weapons that you don't really want to get out of. Because if you get out of your, if you switch from your Great Axe to your Great Sword, you're going to drop your Mauler's Fury, you're going to drop your Bloodlust, or whatever it is, the one that makes you go faster. You're going to drop very important abilities that in your, like, fortifications and empowers and stuff, are going to drop off of your weapon to switch back. And one of the reasons why Greatsword hits so hard and is so versatile is because you're stacking all of these fortifications through Perfect Vigilance. You have a Cleanse from Purifying Roar. You have a Weaken that's going to stay on. You have a Pull. You're getting stacking Rends. Those will stay on. But then you're also getting fortifications and stacking bleeds. A lot of the stuff from this will stay on, like all the debuffs that you add. But the increased crit chance, the empower will drop off. Another increased crit chance. You're going to lose out on the 15% armor penetration from the heavy attacks. Like, you're going to lose a lot of valuable stuff from this. Especially if you go down with Relentless Rush and you gain a 10% empower for 10 seconds. A lot of this stuff switches off. as soon as you switch your weapons, right? So you don't want to switch out after you've stacked a bunch of Greatsword buffs on you and you're in one of the two stances, because the second you switch out, you not only do a lot of these debuffs start falling off, or a lot of these buffs on you start falling off, but you're also going to drop your stance. So you're going to have to re-enter your stance when you switch back, because there's a neutral stance between Onslaught and Defiance. So you don't want to switch off of this weapon unless absolutely necessary. So in my opinion, the weapon that becomes the primary in this situation would be the Greatsword, because you want to keep it out. And especially if you're in Onslaught stance and you're doing a bunch of damage, you're going to want to keep this out. Especially if you're pairing it with like a Warhammer or as like a traditional Bruiser roll. In this case, you want to keep the heals up coming from my Undying Defense, and then if you get low or if your abilities are off cooldown on your Blunderbuss is when you switch, right? So let me switch to Blunderbuss. Here we go. So Blunderbuss, you're going to want to go all the way down Shrapnel Blast. You need Splitting Grenades, that's pretty mandatory. And lately, I've actually been running Blast Shot over Net Shot, because I don't really need to yeet myself off of point as much now that I have way better gear. And I have a really good group healer, so I don't really need Net Shot. But if you don't have that and you're going into a point tank situation, you might be able to drop. I mean, I would actually recommend dropping Blast Shot, especially if you're not very used to it. It's another knockback, but it's a directional knockback, and if you're really good with it, it can save your team and be very helpful. Like, you can push people into ice walls or clumps, and kill extra people that way. You can Blast Shot a IGVG away or knock a healer down and prevent them from healing for that like 1 second. So it can be super beneficial, because it also applies a Rend and 25% haste that lasts in a dedicated area for 8 seconds, and it's a 25% haste. So Blast Shot can actually be really good. It also acts as like an iframing ability, because it gives you grit on your. It's the only thing that gives you grit on the Blunderbuss. So say you're about to get wrecking, like somebody's about to hit you with a wrecking ball. If you switch out and Blast Shot somebody, you're not going to get knocked down. You'll still take the damage, but you won't get knocked down. So that could actually be pretty helpful for like iframing certain abilities with grit. So Last Chance is a mandatory. On a roll is a mandatory. Last Chance, you take 50% less damage for 4 seconds after getting hit while you're below 50% health. It has a really short cooldown at 30 seconds. On a roll is also super good. Triggering an ability decreases all damage taken by 3% for 10 seconds. Stacks up to 5 times. It's always going to be up. And then I take Buckshot and Double Down. And then I also take Future Planning. And that's it from this side. And then from this side, you want Fortifying Aggression. I take Deep Load. And you can take Ramp. I take Deep Load, just because it increases the 15% damage increase to the second shot. This only goes up, especially if you're using Blunderbuss in this situation where it's your secondary weapon. You don't want Ramp. The haste from run and gun is kind of shitty. Future Endeavors is okay because it gives you stamina back, but yeah, you don't really need it. Fortifying Aggression is a must-have too. Successful hits within 3 meters grant Fortify, increasing damage absorption by 10% for 2 seconds. So what I recommend, the playstyle I have with this is I open with the Blunderbuss. I blast through all of my cooldowns, get as much Fortify up. I run in there, use my 2 shots, and then I switch immediately to the Greatsword. And I live in Greatsword until I'm either about to die. So I'm in Greatsword, heavy attacking the crap out of everybody, and iframing with my Calamity counter and dodges. So I'm not taking a lot of damage, and even if I do, I'm fortified to I'm basically at fortified cap between Perfect Vigilance and Roaring Rupture, which deals 120% weapon damage in a 4-meter radius. It also gives you an 8% Fortify for 5 seconds per person hit. So that's 24% Fortify, plus another 20 from Perfect Vigilance. That's 44% Fortify. You're almost at Fortify cap just from this. If you're standing in a sacred ground, you're going to be over Fortify cap. The cool thing is that it also cleanses 2 debuffs. If you're in onslaught stance, it pulls them to you by 3 meters, so it's bigger than gravity well, so it's a 4-meter radius, and even if they're at the edge, they're pulled 3 meters in. If they're at 3 meters, then they're pulled to your body. So it's a huge pull. It's basically a 360 degree what's the hook from Great Axe? Reap. It's a 360 degree reap, except it's better because it also applies weaken, and it makes you uninterruptible for 5 seconds. So it's massive, and you can reclump stuff very easily with this build. The alternate build I would use would be, say, you don't want to use this, you go Perfect Vigilance, and then I would do the Steadfast Strikes or Relentless Rush. I wouldn't take Crosscut. It's too predictable and easy to dodge. But you're a point tank, so having Steadfast Strikes is actually pretty decent. But I'm really just doing it to get into Undying Defiance, so I could get the sustain from the heals. And then I'm going to take this, go down here. The reason why I like this is because it's a cooldown management. So it's a hook. It's like a worse version of Reap. So basically you have 2 pulls. So you have one 360 version of Reap that's better than Reap, way better than Reap in my opinion. It's like a gravity well on your person, but better, because it also weakens them, and it does 120% weapon damage, and it cleanses two debuffs from you, and makes you undying. It's just bonkers ability. This is a worse version of Reap. It's a 2-part attack. You stab your Greatsword forward to impale your foes, then pull it back to rip the blade out. Restores 20 stamina on hit. That's cool. 70% weapon damage on the first hit, and it staggers. The second hit is 120 weapon damage and pulls a target 1.5 meters towards you. That's not very far. Steadfast Recovery. In the first strike of Steadfast Strikes hits, you are healed for 50% of the weapon damage, so basically Reap. In Defiant Stance, the first strike also inflicts 2 stacks of bleeding. It's meh, so 10% weapon damage per second for 6 seconds. That's not that huge. And the 20% cooldown is pretty cool. The weapon perk for this is okay. Roaring Rupture has a huge perk, and so does Skyward Slash. Those are probably the 2 best in the Great Sword tree. Skyward Slash weapon ability is Nullifying Slash. Nullifying Slash immediately gets rid of 1 buff from your enemy, from anybody you hit with it, and it strips their debuffs by 30%. So they're going to lose their buffs faster, and they're going to be immediately losing 1 buff. It's pretty huge. You could basically, it's like Diminishing Orb, but better, right? Because it automatically removes 1 buff from everybody you hit, and then reduces the length of the rest. So that's super good on the weapon. Roaring Rupture is super good on the weapon because I think it's like a 40 or 33 or 40% slow. If it's on the weapon itself, it's pretty big, and it's an AoE slow. So anybody this hits, not only are they pulled to you, but they're also slowed by a significant amount. So it's pretty good. So this would be the alternate build. If you're not very good with Calamity Counter and you're going to be knocking people back, then I would just run Steadfast Strikes. If you think your damage is lacking and you want to try to get a root off, Relentless Rush is cool. The weapon perk for this actually makes it work like Whirlwind from the Great Axe, where you could get through slows and roots. It won't cleanse stun, but it'll actually completely remove slows and roots from you. This is better for like the Bruiser. I would leave that to them. This is the alternate build, and then Calamity Counter would be my preferred, but because I want that extra iframe, and if need be, as a last resort, you can use it to knock back, but it's usually going to be a no-no. You don't want to do it. Huge oof if you start knocking everybody back from out of clumps. But yeah, that's pretty much it. You're going to want to wear full heavy armor. The perks you're going to want on your armor are going to be Shirking Fortification, Resilient, and Refreshing Ward. On your weapon, you're going to want Nullifying Slash or the Slowing Rupture. And then on your Blunderbuss, you're definitely going to want to take the Plague Splitting Grenades, because you want that disease. Because, and this is why this is going to be my favorite build for myself, is because not only is it super tanky, but you have a 24% Plague from the Splitting Grenades on the weapon, and then you have another 20% from Sickening Slash. So you have a 44% Plague on one build. And it's, I think, 10 seconds total for if you both. So it's a huge amount of Plague on point that you're able to lay down, and a lot of debuffs and an extra pull. So if you pair this with another Ice Gauntlet Blunderbuss or even a Great Axe Warhammer, it's just massive. That's a massive amount of battlefield control and debuff. So, but yeah, this Greatsword is basically the primary, and you just use the Blunderbuss for a huge amount of burst damage, and then kind of like you would with a Hatchet Undying. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the skills. The stats that you'd want to use are 300 Strength, 200 Con, full heavy. I wouldn't run this in medium or light as like a DPS or like healer killer. There's just not enough CC. Leave that for the Ice Gauntlet Blunderbuss or some other builds. It's just not the same type of build. This is for dedicated point tanking only. So let me go over the combo real quick, and I want to show you some of the nuances to the Greatsword before I end this video. So you're going to want to open with Splitting Grenades, get up in there, Shrapnel Blast, unload if you need to, you Blast Shot, and then you just switch right over, and you go immediately into your Steadfast Strikes. Then you do your Roaring Rupture, and if you need to, you can block and then immediately cast it again. So let me kind of go through that again. So while you're after that, because you have your Plague up for 10 seconds, you don't really need to get back into your Blunderbuss, and the Greatsword does so much damage on the heavy attacks that you're going to be blasting fools with your heavies. And if you see, since I switched to my Blunderbuss and then back to my Greatsword, I lost my Defiant stance. So you don't want to switch too much off of your Greatsword. And the reason why you take the perk that allows you to get back into Onslaught stance from your heavy attacks is pretty simple. It makes your heavy attacks swing just as fast as your light attacks. So there's absolutely no reason to light attack with the Greatsword at all. Here's the heavy attack without it. Let me sky. And then here's the heavy attack after. It's basically the light attack combo, but you're doing 170% weapon damage. It's insane, and you have full fortification up. It's just too good to switch out of. And you get that from Path of Onslaught. So while you're in Onslaught stance, you're doing 15% more damage. You're taking 15% damage, but your heavy attacks swing twice as fast. So you're doing your heavy attacks as fast as your light attacks. You're getting stamina back every time you hit somebody with it. You're also gaining life back from my Undying Defense. And let me go through the whole combo and the reasoning behind it. So the reason why you open with Skyward Slash is because this is neutral stance. When the sword is vertical, you're in neutral stance. So I didn't hit anything. I didn't do any abilities for a certain amount of time, and then I went back in a neutral stance. So you want to open up with either a heavy attack, but that's too slow. So what I say is you open up with a Skyward Slash into Roaring Rupture, so now it's going to pull everybody to you guaranteed, and then you could just go straight into heavy attacks, which are going to block ranged attacks. You see that blue shield? That is from something called Guard Point, which you get in Defiant Stance. You take 15% less damage, outgoing damage is reduced by 15%, and you block incoming attacks while charging heavy attacks. So you're blocking ranged attacks, you're blocking everything. You're also applying Rends when you block people who are attacking you while you're heavy attacking, and you get some of your health back from landing those heavy attacks. And those heavy attacks are hitting like just as hard as a great Warhammer heavy. Your Greatsword heavies are going to hit that hard. So after that first attack, it's going to put you back into that first heavy attack. Now you're back into Onslaught stance. So you went from Onslaught stance into Defiant stance, back into Onslaught, and now if you do more heavies, they're going to be twice as fast, you're going to be doing a lot more damage, and if you start taking damage again, you go, if you're finding yourself back on the defensive, you just quick cast that so you don't do the knockback, and that puts you right back into defensive stance, and now you have blocks on your heavies, and you just sit there and spam heavies. And then once you're back up, and if you're getting a lot of trouble, you can blast shot away, go back in here, and use your last chance. And hopefully you receive heals. If not, you switch back, guard stance again, into offensive, back into defensive, and now you're taking way less damage, and you're blocking on your heavies. So the stance dance potential of this build is just massive. And the reason why I don't use this steadfast strikes is pretty simple. Let me wait until my cooldowns are off and I'll show you. I got pretty good at going from stances and using my Q to iframe and get back into defensive stance from onslaught stance when I was taking too much damage. But you can use steadfast strikes to do the same thing. So let me show you how. Go down here. Boom. There you go. Take this. There you go. And then I take that one. So this works the same way. You would open with your Skyward Slash to get into onslaught stance. You'd pull everybody towards you. If anybody got away, you would hook. But if you look at the reach of that hook and how narrow the blade is versus like a Reap, it's just not that great, especially when compared to something like Reap. And really the only benefit you get from being in Defiant stance when this weapon happens, or when this goes off, is it inflicts the 2 bleed. You don't get anything from being in Onslaught stance while you do it. The bleeds are kind of insignificant, but you're already going to be usually in Defiant stance while you do this. If you do this coming out of Onslaught, it's not going to give you any benefit. So you might as well just stay in Onslaught unless you see somebody getting away. Or you need the stamina. Or you just need to get back into defensive stance and you don't have Rupture up. So that combo again, Steadfast Strikes, Roaring Rupture. You can do that and then go straight into heavies. And that person's probably going to be dead. Even just after those. Like 1 or 2 heavies will probably kill somebody unless they're getting through heals. But you have so much healing negation. So you don't want to do that. Because see that blue? That pushes everybody away. You don't want to do that. You want to do the Roaring Rupture only while coming out of Onslaught stance. Because otherwise you're going to knock everybody back. But yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. Have a wonderful night. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Later.